uh, primarily more religious people. So on paper, they're against bribing and stuff. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, the way the whole thing is set up, nothing gets done until certain uh, mechanisms are greased. So the way they did this, okay, you're a company, you wanted to get some permits. They said, okay, I'm going to let you do that if you go donate money to that something. Of course, that something benefited your party. Over time, these people started receiving bribes themselves, but the culture is like that. Greeks were the worst. They lied their way through to satisfy the convergence criteria. And one of the reasons they were able to satisfy it, the European Union as a whole did a lot of aid to countries that were in the southern tier. And as this money came in, the effective retirement age in Greece went down below 50s. The pensions were nice. Of course, uh, chickens had to come home to roost. The 2008 crisis happened. The entire world economy crashed. Some economies more than the others, but it was a big crash. Even in US, the annualized growth rate in the first quarter of 2009 was, I think, negative 20%. That's an exaggerated number, but the quarterly change, adjusted for seasonality, was about 5%, negative 5%. That, that's a big crash. We had something bigger only during COVID times. And, but now let's think about the economy of the Greece. What does Greece export? Olive oil and tourism. That's it. They may have some other things here and there, but those are the main drivers of the, and they also have a shipping business. For one reason or another, they're big in international shipping industry. But you no longer have your own drachmas, okay? And you have euro. In order to get out of that, yeah, you need to devalue your currency. And Greece was also heavily indebted. They were not, and since they were lying on their budget statements, they actually did not have the money to pay the interest on the existing bonds, not even the principal. Of course, they have to be bailed out. Let me see if I have those numbers. Uh, Yields on Greek bonds. Let's see. Okay. All-time high was 97.5%. These are bonds that are denominated in euro, not in drachmas. So we're not talking about bond issued by a government of Zimbabwe or Colombia or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with those countries now. Uh, that's because without a bailout, everybody thought that Greek government was going to effectively default. So what they did, European Central Bank, government of Germany and France, pretty much bought Greek bonds, but they're now relatively fine. Let me show you. Okay, Greeks were liars. They're our neighbors. We're liars. They're liars. We'd like to think that they're worse than we are. I'm sure the Norwegians think the same thing about the Swedish, right? Or the Danish. The historical rivalries. The Swedish used to own Norway. We used to own Greece. Uh, Let me show you. Actually, let's do this from Market Watch. Let's look at the yields on 10-year Spanish bonds. Come on, rates. Did they put this behind a wall? Oh, here it is. Spain 10-year government bonds. Let's, I mean, we're going to be done pretty soon, but let me see. Where is that? Oh, here it is. Let's do all the time. So back January 2012, the yields were about 685. If you looked at that point, the yields on German bonds, they were effectively zero. Remember, these are euro denominated bonds. So if you bought uh, Spanish bonds and you financed this by shorting the German bonds, you made that much spread. And similar, the Portuguese were similar, Italian were similar. And for these countries to get out of the effects of 2007, it took a while. I mean, when we do international bond markets, I'll look at these in detail, but for the spreads with bonds to come down to normal levels, it took a while. Why? Because you no longer have monetary policy and you cannot devalue. So adjustment takes a while. The only way you could adjust is for the prices of your inputs to go down. Reducing the wages of people is a hard thing to do for a lot of different reasons, especially in Europe. Reducing the prices of domestic inputs takes a while. There are contracts. On the other hand, countries like Iceland, they lost their entire banking system. They were all bankrupt, as Ireland did. But Ireland was in euro, Iceland was not. Iceland uh, devalued their currency, or market did it for them, and they got out of that crash within a year or two. It took Ireland more than 5 years. Do you know what was the unemployment rate in Spain at the height of that crisis? The youth unemployment rate? 50%. In Greece, it was 70%. The Spanish unemployment rate is always had always been high, typically around 20%. It went up to 40%. Why? Because you don't have the means to get out of it. Spain is just a bigger version of Greece with a little bit less lying. Hmm? Oh, if you're not eating in America or Britain, food is always good. These are old cultures. I mean, let me show you. My Facebook was here a while ago. Uh, a picture from my trip to Wales. This is a church in Wrexham. It's called Hope Street Church. It is an 800-year-old church. And in England, that is not necessarily considered that old. In Turkey, this is practically new. I mean, we have things that are 8,000 years old, ruins, because that was where the civilization was. But in America, anything older than 50 is called historical. I mean, I lived in houses, in a house in north of London that was 200 years old. I mean, I never considered myself Oh, that's a very old house because you don't have that. But either way, uh, the state churches, what were they called? Stavkirken? The stave churches? Oh yeah. Are there any ruins of Norse churches, Viking churches? Maybe in Uppsala, because it was all wood. Yeah. Anyway, let's stop here. Mhm. Let me briefly tell you. I think yeah, it's read chapter 5. Actually, let's do chapter 3 next week. The balance of payments. We're gonna skip chapter 4, uh, but then we'll do chapter 5. Balance of payments. Basically, we're gonna talk about distinction between trade accounts, current accounts. How do you get an idea whether a country's currency may or should be in trouble based on those balance of payments accounts? Right? I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy your barbecue if you're gonna do one, and I know I will.